Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Kubiak from K-12, and welcome to the Better Learning Podcast. I am coming to you from Bellevue, Washington today, and I am so excited to have Dr. Heather Sánchez, the Deputy Superintendent of this amazing school district. Welcome, Dr. Heather Sánchez.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon.
Oh, we're excited to have you with us. Maybe you could give the audience of the Better Learning Podcast, which is comprised of, there's a lot of architects, designers, school leaders, facilities, maintenance, all sorts of great people that listen to our messages across the country, and give us a little bit of background about Dr. Sánchez.
Okay, I'm happy to do so. Again, my name is Dr. Heather Sánchez, Deputy Superintendent, Bellevue, Washington. A little bit of background on me. I have been a public school educator now for 26 years. So I've been at this game a while. I'm originally from New Mexico, so I'm completely on the other side of the country from where I was born and raised. A product of Albuquerque Public Schools initially, born on the eastern side of the state of New Mexico. And I started my career right on the U.S.-Mexico border in a small district as a mid-high teacher at the time. So I started my career as a secondary teacher, so high school, middle school for several years, language arts and social studies, humanities, and that sort of thing in New Mexico. And then I spent 10 years in Colorado, and at that time, I got married along the way. I have 3 boys, and then I moved into being a literacy coach and then leading a professional development department in Colorado. And then I became a school principal. And so we moved here. We've been up in the great Pacific Northwest for 14 years now. And at the time, I was a school principal, so I've been an elementary school principal. And then I became a director of teaching and learning, choice, innovation, and learning programs in another adjacent district. And then I've been an executive director of schools, a chief of schools, a chief operating officer, and now the deputy superintendent. So I've done almost every job there is in education, a little bit of everything. I love the work that I do. I am myself a first-generation college attendee, first in my family and my first generation to go to college. And I am sitting here with you today because there were some educators who saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself when I was younger. I went through Title I schools the whole way through. And so, I'm a lifer in education. I believe in the power of education to transform lives. And I intentionally, a couple years ago, began shifting from, strictly speaking, the instructional side of the house. And then as I moved into a chief of schools role, of course, there's a lot of operational components that go along with that. HR, staffing, operations, those sort of things. And so a couple years ago, I transitioned from chief of schools into really operational leadership. So in my current role as the deputy superintendent, I oversee human resources, finance, business services, facilities, safety and security, athletics and activities, nutrition services, transportation, the welcome center, enrollment, basically everything that makes the district run except the instruction, right? So I think what's been really, really cool is that I came from the instructional side of the house, and I'm now on the other side of the house, so to speak. And I think that has really been such a gift in the work that I do here in the district in terms of really connecting the learning experience of students to everything else that's going on around them. How they get to school, the space that they're learning in, how that space is designed, the conditions for learning, and then, of course, the money part of it, right? Bonds, levies, school finance, all of that. And so, every day is a little bit different. I've been back in Bellevue for 8 years now, and initially a couple years as a principal, and then I took a field trip in another district and came back. So a combined 10 years in Bellevue now.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Wow. You have many hats in your closet, and you're still actively using all of them too.
Yes. And depending on the day and sometimes the minute, it depends on which hat I need.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Let's start off from your leadership perspective. So as a district leader, how do you balance the immediate operational challenges while still protecting the long-term vision for what learning should look like from now to 20 plus years?
Yeah, I think that's really an important question because anybody who works in education or even adjacent to education, there is a lot happening. I mean, there's 20,000 students in this district that I'm serving in now, and on any given day, there's all sorts of things happening, and a fair amount of it requires an immediate response. And so that can be anything from a crisis, a safety and security incident, to a health issue, to an issue with a community group. And so I think that one of the things that can happen is that you kind of get, there's sometimes kind of this high to solving problems, firefighting. You've been a school leader. It's very easy to sort of get stuck in the reactive space. And you can spend all your time there because there's no shortage of things to react to, right, on any given day. And so I think what's really important is, there are day-to-day operational challenges. You have a couple years ago, we had a bomb cyclone, here in the Pacific Northwest. That's surely an operational challenge. Mm-hmm. You have issues with the power going out somewhere. You have a shortage of bus drivers. There's a problem with a facility, a building floods, something like that. There's always those things. And so those things usually happen at 4 a.m. or earlier, and so there's this space where you just have to solve a problem. And so on that note, I think it's really important to have really clear systems in place around who's doing what. I work with a great team of leaders. They're outstanding, and I can rely on them. So when something's really going sideways in facilities, I know the executive director of facilities and operations is going to be on it. We're going to have clear communication channels. We're going to have a clear communication plan around who is brought into the loop and how we're communicating what's happening. And that's all really essential. And if you don't have really clear structures around communications, organizational charts, and all of that, then you're going to miss things. And that's not to say we don't, because we certainly do sometimes, but it's essential that you have those in place. And I think what I would say, Jeff, is those are necessary but not sufficient, because that keeps you where you are, right? That keeps the system in the status quo and running. And so we want our systems to run. Certainly we want our school districts to run, but we want them to thrive. And in order for them to really thrive, you have to be able to do some vision casting. And that's where the strategic priorities of a district come into play. And so, sometimes when people talk about a strategic plan, they're like, oh, it's some boring, piece of paper on a shelf or something somewhere. Right. But that's not the intent of it. And so as a district or a system is developing its vision, part of that must be, what do we want the experience to be of our families and our students 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? And that requires a totally different kind of thought space. And that requires prioritizing to community engagement, listening to the community, listening to students, listening to families, and incorporating that into every aspect of your strategic goals. So, for example, in Bellevue, one of our key strategic priorities that came out of our most recent strategic plan was around human-centered systems. And so, you don't see a lot of strategic priorities around necessarily that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so we have that as one of our key strategic priorities, human-centered systems, because when we went out and listened to our community, as we designed our next set of priorities, there were members of our community who said, Bellevue's really high performing, has a great reputation, great academic programs, great facilities, beautiful campuses, wonderful location, and sometimes we feel like the relationship is a little bit transactional. And so we now have that as a priority in terms of how do we really center humans in our systems and our processes. And that includes the design of new buildings and the construction of new buildings, of which we have one that's going to open, our latest will open in the fall. And we have 2 others on the docket, right, that we're in the design phase with. That includes how we prioritize our strategic priorities around finance. How do we align our budget to what we think is most important? And then, of course, the bread and butter of what we're here for, are students able to read, and are they experiencing academic success? So what I would say is, you have to really thoughtfully have systems to manage those day-to-day operational challenges, because they're just not going to go away. And you have to intentionally cultivate space for dreaming and vision casting, and that cannot be done in isolation.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you brought up the human-centered focus, especially in an AI-heavy world right now, AI thought-heavy world. You just came out of a meeting about
AI, yes.
And to still focus on the students, the community, and the actual people that are doing the work is tremendous at this time still. So.
Yeah, you can't forget at the end of the day, we are all here serving students.
Right.
If there were no students, none of us would have jobs.
Correct.
That's just the bottom line. And, and we have the ability to dramatically impact the trajectory of a student's life in so many ways on a day-to-day basis.
100%, 100%. So that kind of leads us, you had talked about these amazing facility projects that you have. You have current capital and technology investments that touch everything from cloud or STEM learning, cybersecurity, safety, sustainability, and student experience. So how do you help the community see the efforts as investments in learning rather than infrastructure upgrade?
Yeah, well, I've spoken about community engagement in establishing the strategic priorities, but then I think the other side of that is engaging the community in the design process itself, and then communicating or telegraphing out the outcome of that, some of which is really, really visible, and some of which may not be. So there's the storytelling part of that, because, if you don't fill in the blanks for people, they will fill them in themselves. But also there's just so much to be proud of. And so I can give you a few examples of how we are doing this. But it is a constant challenge to make sure that we're effectively communicating and telling the story of the investment, the capital investment, the capital tech levy dollar investments that we have in our district. Those are really to a large, and we're very grateful for those, but those are voter approved investments. And so those are taxpayer dollars.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that our community and our taxpayers see that investment up front. That looks a few ways. So as an example, in terms of our building design, we were just talking the other day about some of our more recent builds that are aligned to our sustainability efforts, but also our fiscal efforts. So, for example, Puesta del Sol Elementary School in our district was the first net negative school in the state of Washington. So that just means that the school produces more energy than it uses. It was the first in Washington state to do that. And we engaged the community with that design process, as well as architects and, there was, and students. And so then, as a most recent example, we recently opened a welcome center using some of our investment dollars. So just next door from the building we're sitting in right now, we have a welcome center. And so we also have a partnership for some of that space that we've cultivated with the city of Bellevue. So this is, a lot of universities have a welcome center.
Yes.
School districts usually do not.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I think we may be the only one in Washington state at this point that has one.
Okay.
It was a relatively low investment prospect. We took a building next door that we had offices in that, families would walk into this space, and it was kind of like a dark, long tunnel, like a almost near-death experience, the dark, long tunnel. Families come in, there's doors that are closed, it's a dark, long hallway. They're trying to get to student placement, they're trying to enroll their student, and that's the first experience they have. So we completely changed that space with feedback from the community. Comprehensive feedback from the community. We worked with an interior designer that donated her time. We worked with students and we worked with families, and we designed a welcome center. So now when a family walks into that space, they can walk in there for anything they need. And it's a wide open, beautiful space. And they can enroll their child. They can get information on after-school care, child care, if they need school supplies, backpacks, if they need connections to community resources. And it's a very opening space. Multilingual access. The community can see that. And so we tell that story, but it's also very, very visible. And we have a space, as I mentioned, with the City of Bellevue where we partner, and they can run city programs in this joint shared space. So it's partnering with the local community. And it wasn't a particularly high fiscal note. It was just thinking about the experience of our families when they walk in the door and what that feels like for them and wanting it to feel welcoming, right? Just one other recent example is our school that is going to open the soonest would be our Big Picture campus, which is opening in the fall, this upcoming fall of 2026. And that is one of our choice schools, and it's part of the Big Picture instructional model. So as we went through the design of that particular building, we took into account the learning model itself, and the architects took that into consideration. We got feedback from the community, and the students at that school interned, and they need to have collaborative pods. So the design of the school is intentionally designed to support their time to work with mentors and in their internships and in pods. So the design looks different than some of our other schools, as well as the physical placement very close to Metro so that the kids can hop on the bus if they need to and go to their internship. Those are just a few examples. On the technology side, we are a one-to-one district, and that comes through our technology dollars as well, and ensuring that families see that the tools are being used responsibly to augment learning. And that we're taking community feedback. Currently right now there's a tremendous amount of community feedback around the use of AI, technology, period, screen usage, particularly for younger students. And so we're getting a lot of community feedback around that. So we're launching a design team to get some feedback around that. And it's great that we have the technology, but should we really be using it as much as we are maybe at the younger grades?
Right.
So it's helping the community see visibly what those investments are, but how the design of them is responsive to the community itself that is critical. Otherwise, it may feel like the dollars are just going somewhere and the community might not really understand why, or worse, they might feel like it's not responsive or meeting a need. So that's the most important thing, is what need is it meeting for the community?
Yes, I love the theme that you keep coming back to, the word community, and it's so important, especially, throughout the West and Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of districts that have school closures because of declining enrollment. So how are they going to bring the community in? And maybe walk the listeners through the Welcoming Center just a little bit more. So how many languages, and are there, right where you go through the doors, what do you see as someone that's coming in there the first time?
Yeah, before I do that, I will just say, because you mentioned school consolidation and closure, our enrollment is currently stable in the Bellevue School District. And we are one of few in Western Washington at this time that it's not rapidly declining for, but it was previously. So it has stabilized in the past few years.
Bravo.
And which we're very happy about. But we did have the experience, and I had the experience to lead through not just COVID reopening, right, which I was one of the key leaders for, but also we had 3 years ago where we did close 2 schools because our enrollment was rapidly declining post-COVID. And I had a whopper of a year where, as a leader, I was supervising at the time all of the elementary schools. We closed 2 schools in 1 year and opened 1, all in the same year. And that was one for the books. And that was Puesta del Sol, which I mentioned was the one we opened because there was a concrete strike and all sorts of other things coming out of COVID. And so it delayed the opening a little bit. So I had this whopper of a year where we had to close 2 schools because of declining enrollment, and we opened 1. And I learned a lot about community engagement through that process, and I will be the first to tell you it was imperfect at best, in terms of our community engagement, and perhaps that's why I keep coming back to it. Because over my career, I've just had lots of opportunities to learn about the importance and the ways to go about best engaging the community, sometimes because I did it well, and sometimes because it could have been done a whole heck of a lot better, right? But all of it ways to think about it. So coming out of consolidation and closure and the opening of a new school and the Welcome Center, so we'll go back to that. the inception of it was really small. It's kind of an interesting story. I was walking over into the building next door one day with our former deputy superintendent, and I was having a conversation at the time with the individual who was supervising early learning, which happened to be in that building, right? And so she was saying to me, and she's currently one of our chiefs of schools, she said to me, when families walk over here and they're trying to get to early learning or student placement, it's kind of like dark, and there's nobody there when they walk in. It's just kind of like this long hallway, and they kind of wander around, and they're not sure where they're supposed to go. And she said, wouldn't it be fun if we just were able to put a desk or something here so that there was somebody when they came in, because we have a receptionist over in this building, but in the other one we did not. And that was the inception of it. That one small conversation, and I cannot take any credit from where it went from there, but then that one conversation led to other conversations and other conversations around, well, what might it look like? And then we had our former deputy superintendent and some other people that were taking their kids on college tours. And then they came back and there was another conversation. Well, wait a minute, these colleges all have these super fancy pants welcome centers. And what if we did something like that? And, fast forward, that became the Welcome Center. The inception of it was a small idea of the experience that somebody has when they enter into a space, and the feedback from our community as we worked on our strategic plan, when they were telling us, hey, you guys do a great job. This is such a great, it's a good district, and we don't necessarily always feel heard. And so, we took all of that and these, kind of like breadcrumb conversations became the Welcome Center. Yeah. Then we worked with our facilities department, who are amazing, and said, what if? And they just have a tendency to go like, yeah, we can figure this out. We can figure this out. So I will tell you, our executive director of facilities was not in the recent past over next door in the Welcome Center on a Saturday building IKEA cabinets himself. He's over there putting them in. So that became the Welcome Center. And so fast forward, now when you walk into that space, it's open, it's bright, it's welcoming. There's seating, there's soft sofa seating, there's low tables, there's spaces that are separate quiet meeting spaces. And the staff over there is a desk where you walk in where they welcome families, but rather than families sitting down to fill out forms, a Welcome Center staff member or volunteer will come to them with a laptop and say, where would you like to sit with them. There's a kitchen play area for, children. There's books. There's lots of, little nooks and crannies that you can tuck into where people will be most comfortable, and they just get what they need. And in terms of languages, we use Pocket Talks and language translation devices. We have multilingual staff. But, in our district on any given day, we have, más o menos, more or less, families speaking 127 languages coming from 121 countries. Yeah. This is incredibly diverse. And so we want families to know that, we don't have staff that speak 127 languages, but we have tools, technology-based tools, where we can sit with you and have real-time interpretation.
Right.
When we work with schools at K-12, it's not just about furniture or design. It's about impact. Our radically student-centered approach puts students at the center of every decision. From that first conversation to the final walkthrough, we're focused on creating spaces that actually work for the kids, the teachers, and the community. So if you're looking to do more than just check a box on your next project, let's talk. Visit K12.com. That's KAY-TWELVE.com and see how we're helping schools transform learning one student at a time. Because at K-12, it's not just about projects and furniture, it's about purpose.
So the latest iteration of the Welcome Center, just to, bring this around, is we're now adding a cafe. And so the cafe will be opening next fall, and we're doing that in conjunction with one of our local restaurants that supports many parts of the community, but specifically individuals who may have developmental disabilities. And so the cafe will be connected to the Welcome Center, and the kids working in that will be from our transitions program. And so those are young adults who may have developmental delays or disabilities, and they work in, we have a small kind of cafe downstairs now, but they will work in the new cafe. And so in addition to the seating and the open space, there will be a cafe. And the design is down to making sure that the selection of the coffee maker that we have in that cafe is easy to use and accessible for the people that may be working in it and not overly complicated.
Yeah.
And so we're partnering with one of our programs, but also our local community, the Belden Cafe specifically, is partnering with us around the launch of this. So that will launch this fall.
That's a wonderful tour. Yeah. Thank you. So I love the power of a district and the leaders within that district that have the propensity to say yes when they're offered the what if or can we, should we. And the more that educators are challenged with saying yes, I believe really empowers our community and students.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And that's been a part of, some of the coolest things that we've done operationally, the design of the buildings. I mean, right now we're in the design phase for rebuilding Interlake High School, right? And so it's not going to be a build from the studs up. We're renovating it, but just yesterday, or no, it was the day before yesterday, I received an email presentation, and there are a couple of high school students that go to Interlake High School that are interning as part of the design process. And so they put together a presentation. They've been working with the architects, they've been working with the facilities team, and they influenced the design of the new Interlake High School. Not only did they influence it, they have a slideshow to show where they impacted the architectural design and the layout for part of the new build, and it's now in the design phase. And so those students, we're working on bringing them to an upcoming board meeting where they can share how their voice directly contributed to the design of the new Interlake High School. And, that comes from a willingness to, there's a curiosity is so important. Curiosity as a characteristic is so important in life, period. And especially in terms of how we're serving students, and the willingness to say, yeah, but, or what if, and as they say, everything is figure-outable, and that really helps stretch our thinking on the design of spaces in particular, but so many other things as well.
Yeah, and I think another word that comes to mind is the word yet, right? And
right.
Maybe sure, not yet, but learning from our students is something, I think it's a lost art. We need to get back to it because they teach us as much or more than we'll ever
for sure.
be able to feed them, right?
And they're usually pretty direct.
Yes, they are.
If you just ask, they will level with you for the most part.
Yeah. So getting back to some of your new builds or renovations you're talking, what does meaningful transformation look like in the Bellevue district beyond just the construction or renovating the buildings?
So in terms of buildings in particular, what I would say is meaningful transformation is designing a space that is thoughtfully designed to improve or augment or accelerate the experience of the people in the space. And so that in of itself is not necessarily the nuts and bolts part. It is thoughtfully engaging in who is going to be in this space. How old are the students going to be that are in this space? The adults, what sort of learning is happening here? What sort of learning do we want to be happening here? And how do we think about every detail designing around that? It's kind of like I would say I like to host, when our family gets together and we have holidays, I love to host because I like thinking about every little thing. From the time a guest walks into my house, what does it smell like? What does it look like? What's the first thing they see? Where are they seated? What kind of seat are they in? What's the lighting like? Is there a napkin? All those 1,000 little details that impact the experience that somebody has. Students are the same and their schools are the same. I heard, I don't know if this is actually true or not, disclaimer. I heard a long time ago somewhere that when somebody's thinking about buying a house, that they will they will make a decision within the first 7 seconds that they enter the space about whether or not they're going to buy the house, just based on kind of sort of the vibe and all that, everything they're taking in, as soon as they walk in the door. I do not know if that is true or not, but that stuck with me, and there is some relevance to that. So as we think about designing spaces that are transformative, if you go about it with that mindset and you surround yourself with a team that can offer multiple perspectives, that's where you come up with really interesting ideas that are not necessarily cost exorbitant. In fact, we don't want them to be, because we must be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
That's an obligation that we have. And I do not take that lightly. But when you're designing a space and you're thinking about it being really transformative, the question you have to ask is, who are you asking? Who are you asking? Because a teacher is going to give you a different set of feedback than the principal might, than a parent might, than a student might, than an architect might, than a construction, the superintendent on site might, at the work site. And all of those are really important, and you have to be willing to do the legwork, really, to get that feedback and to take it into consideration. And that's where you really design transformative spaces. When you skip any of those, everything in life is about like putting in the work up front. Everything in life, I've just learned over the years that putting in the work up front and then going from there is really an investment in the relationship that you're building, but also design.
I want you to reflect for a moment. We're going to kind of take a fun sidewalk, and I want you to keep yourself as Dr. Heather Sánchez, but reflect back to a younger Heather Sánchez, pre-doctor, early educator. What is something you could look at and would like to have known to be able to tell her then? And then also something the young Heather could do the same to the seasoned doctor. Sánchez.
Okay, those are really good questions. I may ask you to repeat the second part because I was already thinking about the first part. I was like, ooh.
Of course.
So I think what's important to know the young Heather, if I may, I'm going to go back to before seasoned educator. The young Heather, the 9 or 10-year-old Heather, would never believe that I'm sitting here right now. And I am the first in my family to get a doctorate, master's degree, go to college. The 9 or 10-year-old Heather would have not even had in my schema at all that it was possible to be sitting here. You might as well told me I was going to be on Mars. Like the fact that I would be sitting on the opposite side of the country as, deputy superintendent with a doctorate, doing, serving families the best that I am able to. I would have never believed it. And I think that that's important because I think there's lots of kids out there that were just like me, who were, came from really challenging circumstances like I did, and who just don't think things are possible. And I saw possibility because others saw it in me. And so that is in large part why I'm an educator anyway. That's why I do what I do, because, there are many students who are very fortunate to have a different set of circumstances growing up, but there's a lot who don't. So that's the first thing that I would say. But the young Heather, what I would say to myself now, I think that what I would have said to myself now would be like, first of all, I knew you had it in you. I knew you had it in you. And I'm glad you didn't give up. And the young Heather would say to the Heather now is keep at it, and stay curious.
Yeah, I love that. It's both saddening but empowering for me to hear that, right?
Yeah.
So there's too many, as an educator, teacher, principal, there's too many of our young female girls that don't get that, that don't get that pump up, that encouragement the same way that maybe some of the boys do. And they need that belief, just one little thing. And for you to have the road that you traveled upon, and you can look back and see those amazing accomplishments, is, so incredible. Because that's what our girls need. They just need that one chance, that one person that believes, that one teacher, that coach, whomever it is, so that they can say, yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, I was doing a panel recently at an event, and I was sharing a little bit about that. And, I kind of like the analogy I would use is the butterfly effect, right? So when a butterfly flaps its wings, there's this, you don't necessarily see it, but there's this impact that goes for quite a distance, right? And so I think that working in education, and growing up in some very challenging circumstances, there are people who had an impact on me that I'm quite certain to this day never knew it, but did, right? And I think you're spot on. There are girls and young girls out there, and boys too,
Sure.
But I'm going to stick with the girls theme. Lots of young girls out there who did not have a mindset of possibility for a lot of reasons. There are people out there that can, sponsor them and help move them forward, and and understand that the sky really, 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 really is the limit. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I try and do now. I try and model that to every degree possible. And that's part of why I wanted to completely switch over to the operations side of the house, both so I could understand how the whole ship runs in a large district, which has been incredibly insightful, but also because there aren't necessarily a lot of women who do it. Or, have come over from the instructional side and now are in a role like mine. And so I think that helps me, and I think that it helps others who are watching me.
Right. So I'm going to use a phrase, radically student-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that's a phrase that drives my work because of the company I work for.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that phrase mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Radically student-centered.
Mm-hmm. When I think about that, I think to me that means keeping students at the center of all the decisions that are made. And the radical part, to me, radically means new, different, pushing the limits, having curiosity. And so to me, that means when I think about something being radically student-centered, that means not only keeping students and families at the center, but keeping what's possible, keeping in mind that really is up to us. What's possible is really up to us.
Yes, it is.
Funds are not certainly, I'm just going to say school finance is tough, and school budgets and funding are tight and super duper thin, and resources are very limited. Financial resources, human resources are very, very limited. That's just the reality of working in public education. But what's not limited is the ability with which we can think about how we are serving students in creative ways. So to me, and being relentless in that pursuit, because honestly, students deserve it. Students deserve the very best we have each and every day. And so I think it really is incumbent upon us to constantly push the limits of our thinking around how we are serving students.
Bravo to that. And on a final note, let's think about looking ahead. What gives you the most optimism about the future of education and the environments where the students learn?
Yeah. I think what gives me the most optimism is the students themselves, first of all. I was at an event, because it's event season, right? We have graduations coming up, and we have all the fundraising events and all the dinners and all the galas and all the PTSA awards things, and it's like every single day, but it's exhausting and very exciting, right? So I was at an event recently, and there were some students presenting, and I was just blown away. And I am consistently just blown away. And my student intern just came in is listening to me right now, who's a high school senior, Stella, who's interning with me this year. And so the students that I see on a day-to-day basis are just incredible. And so I turned to somebody who was at this event with me, and I said, dang, I don't think I was that smart when I was in high school or that talented or that creative. Like, I'm just blown away with the things that young people are doing today. That excites me. And, our young people today are really, they're just not taking it. They're bold in a way that I don't know. At least I didn't feel that bold when I was their age. And so that's what gives me optimism, is that I see the things that students are doing and saying and advocating for, and it's just so incredible to me. And that's why I'm so excited about the future of education, as challenging as it is. We have lots of challenges. And in terms of the spaces that they're learning in, education is changing. There is no denying the fact that coming out of COVID, it's changing in ways that, it's accelerating. Students want and need and are really in so many ways, spoken or otherwise, demanding that their learning opportunities really meet their needs, and that includes the spaces they're learning in. And so I think that as we think about that, some of the best ideas are right now and will be coming from people coming out of the system who are saying, yeah, but have you ever thought about, but what if, what about this? And I think it's so important to cultivate that in students, because I can tell you right now, I've heard ideas from kids that I never would have thought of. I never would have thought of. Yeah. And I think that as we think about designing spaces, learning spaces specifically for kids, it is that curiosity about possibility and willingness to do things differently, in some cases maybe radically differently, that is going to propel forward the learning experiences that our students have.
100%. And I think the word legacy fits well into that, because the students want to leave their mark, right?
For sure.
What they've done, they want to be better for the next gen.
As they should.
Mm-hmm. And I want to thank you. This has been amazing. I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
Once again, this has been a great conversation with Dr. Heather Sánchez of Bellevue. And shout it out to someone you might share this conversation with. Better Learning Podcast. We love all listeners. If you're interested, go on the Better Learning Podcast website and ping us if you'd like to be on the show. But thanks again for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It was my pleasure.
The Better Learning Podcast is produced by Matt Rogers and edited by Kelly Jones. The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily represent the perspectives of their affiliated companies, organizations, or associations.